tax heads up.
Now, I'd just like to say a few words right here about taxes. Because every time the bureaucrats run out of money, well, Congress talks it to the working man.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And I don't think it's wonderful funny when they take so much of my money and do things with it I don't understand. I don't know why they feel they've got to squeeze us. But I'll tell you just exactly where I stand. I believe that 10% is good enough for Jesus. Well, it ought to be enough for Uncle Sam.
All right, well, get ready for the deluge of tax cut lies from the Democrats because they are on the way, all right? Understand that, and it's going to be the same old playbook that they pull out and dust off every time somebody wants to let you keep more of your money. Income taxes. With President Trump, this is Investors Business Daily. With President Trump turning his attention toward tax reform, Democrats are busy dusting off their old shop-worn claims about federal income taxes, and almost nothing they say about taxes is true. Trump plans to make a pitch for tax reform at an event in Springfield, Missouri. Well, actually, he did, but he explained that tax cuts are the key to a better economy. More jobs, increased income, all of that. Here come the big lies from the Democrats, who, by the way, never, ever want to lower taxes. You see, because the Democrats want you to believe that the government is your country. And if the government is your country, then paying taxes is patriotism. It's the usual inverted reality that comes from the left. This is number one. Bush tax cuts didn't work. The American people, says Winnie Schlackelberg of the Center for American Progress, the American people know from experience under the Bush era that tax cuts for millionaires and corporations will not benefit the U.S. economy, jobs, or the middle class. They are also supposedly boosted the deficit. Well, Democrats have been peddling this lie for so long that no amount of hard data is likely to stop them, but here goes anyway. Federal deficits steadily declined after Bush signed the 2003 tax law, which retroactively cut income taxes. The deficit dropped from $470 billion in 2004 to $167 billion in 2007. The economy perked up, GDP jumping 6.9% in the third quarter of 2003. And I remember that. Remember when Bush signed that first phony tax cut where single people got $300 in a check and married people got $600? It didn't make a dent in the economy. But eventually, the real tax cuts, I believe they were passed in July, and the real tax cuts kicked in retroactively, and almost immediately, GDP jumped to over 8% and averaged out in quarter 3 to 6.9 and 4.8% in quarter 4. In the 6 quarters after Bush signed those tax cuts, average quarterly GDP growth topped 4%. Now, that's what they told us, by the way, for the last 8 years. Could never happen again. Well, we just had 3. Now, compare that with 2.1% for the previous 6 quarters. Anyone want to guess how Obama's tax hikes affected GDP growth? I think we all know. By the end of 2007, the unemployment rate had dropped to 4.7, down from 6.1 when Bush signed the 2003 tax cuts into law. Median household income climbed 3%. Income inequality, meanwhile, didn't change one whit. It was the financial crisis which, as we have repeatedly told you, was caused by misguided federal policies that forced banks to make bad loans, first enacted under President Clinton. Actually, that's not true. It was first enacted under Carter, but Clinton put it on steroids, and that erased all the gains that were made. Okay, here comes lie number 2. The rich don't pay their fair share. The last thing we need is for the tax code to be even more rigged in favor of millionaires and billionaires and corporate insiders, claims the organizers of Not One Penny, a liberal coalition that includes George Soros-backed MoveOn.org. First of all, explain to me how the tax code is rigged for corporations when they're paying the highest corporate tax on the planet. If by rigged, liberals mean a tax code under which the top 1% pay almost 40% of federal income taxes, which, by the way, is up from 33% in 2001, and that the U.S., the most progressive in the industrialized world, progressive tax, that is, which is not a good thing, then we'd agree. But the idea that the rich don't pay their fair share is just utterly false. In fact, one reason tax cuts always seem to benefit the rich more than the middle class is precisely because the tax code is so heavily skewed toward the wealthy. According to the IRS, the bottom 50% account for less than 3% of income taxes paid. So the top 1% pays 40%, the bottom 50% pays 3%. As for corporate taxes, the U.S. imposes the highest corporate income tax rate in the world, up to 40% when federal and state taxes are combined. Yet it has one of the lowest collection rates as a share of GDP. Now why? Well, because the code is riddled with loopholes that benefit, quote-unquote, corporate insiders. In other words, corporations with political clout. Well, that's crony capitalism, which isn't capitalism at all. Now, the GOP plan, at least I'm hoping they'll do something. The GOP plan is to cut the tax rate and then close the loopholes and simplify the code. The only losers are going to be the companies that rely on political connections and gimmicks to lower their tax burden. And finally, this lie. Tax reform must be revenue neutral. At a bare minimum, tax reform should not lose revenue, said the Liberal Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Well, what they and the other Democrats mean by this is that any tax cut has to be offset by a tax hike someplace else. Well, that doesn't work. And that no amount can be made of no account can be made of the growth effect of tax cuts. But the idea that tax reform has to be revenue neutral is based on a myth. that taxes are at an acceptable level right now. They are not. In fact, they're historically high. As it stands, taxes as share of GDP will be 18% this year, which is well above the average since World War II. Now, the reason the federal government is running deficits is not because of not enough taxation. It's because of spending. Spending will equal 21% of GDP this year, which is well above the post-war average. You know, we don't have a revenue problem. We have a wealth problem. And if you want to fix the revenue problem, fix the wealth problem. Do you know what that means? That means lowering taxes on the rich and the corporations. But that's not fair. Tax cuts, tax policy is not about fairness, as Barack Obama would have you believe, because that's just stupid. Tax policy is about rescuing the tools of the economy, which are dollars. Rescuing dollars from the hands of an entity that spends them politically and stupidly, and without regard to what it is that's going to actually happen when that money is spent, taking that money away from that inefficient structure, the United States government, and giving it back to the people who know better how to spend that money because it's theirs and they really care about it. And they make decisions every day. Sometimes they make decisions to buy, and sometimes they make decisions not to buy. And companies that don't produce go out of business because people don't buy. Companies that do well. I mean, folks, it's about rescuing money. It's not a benefit program to decide which group favored by the Democrats gets the most. There's not a whole lot of tax relief you can give to the bottom 50% when they only pay 3% now. You know, you're going to hear the same old crap and the same old lies over and over and over again. By the way, speaking of lies, gouging. Here comes that word again. And by the way, from people in Texas who ought to know better, there's no such thing as price gouging. It's simply the market working to distribute resources to where they're needed the most. I know it sounds cruel, but it isn't. It works. We'll try to explain this in case there's any liberals who just rolled by here and can't believe what they're hearing. I'll try to explain it for you. Let's see. When is that coming up here? Hold on a second. Let me check my... Oh, man. I don't know if I'll find a way to squeeze it in here this morning, but just there is so much to talk about, especially about Hillary. Have you heard this?